Hello, coming to you from one of the enlightened cities of board gaming, Omaha, Nebraska. Welcome to the Out of the Dust podcast. I'm your host, trailblazing Bryce Journey, tied in with the popular recurring Out of the Dust Geek list on Board Game Geek. The Out of the Dust podcast is a weekly podcast that is focused on re-exploring games we played that we hadn't previously played in a year or more. Why did the game get dusty? Why did you decide to dust it off? How does the game compare to how you remembered it? Are you likely to play it more often in the future? These are the questions that we are interested in examining on Out of the Dust. This week on the podcast, episode 21. On the Out of the Dust segment, I'll bring To Court the King out of the dust, and a contributor will dust off Reef Encounter and Virgin Queen. On the reaction segment, I'll discuss the Essen thefts. On the What I Have Been Playing segment, I review The Estates. On the Obscure Bryce Game segment, I review Tahuantinsuyu. And we wrap up the episode by concluding my top 5 games for Halloween countdown with number 1 on the list.
Oh gosh, I'm say, hey, the friends up from here are flexing.
I had a chance to bring To Court the King out of the dust recently. This is a game that just barely got dusty for me, having last played it 1 year, 0 months, and 2 days ago. To Court the King is a dice game from acclaimed designer Tom Lehman. It features a simple Yahtzee-esque mechanic in which players get 3 rolls to create sets of pips and straights and use these roll results to acquire special roll-modifying dice abilities and more dice, with the ultimate objective to be the first player to roll a 7 of a kind. It's an addicting game, and I used to own a physical copy, but traded it away after adding its re-implementation, Favor the Pharaoh, to my collection. I thought Favor the Pharaoh had a better theme and improved upon the mechanics enough that To Court the King felt redundant and unnecessary. But I still play To Court the King occasionally at Yucata to help level up. I usually don't win, though, because it's a dice game. There is some luck involved, and I rarely seem to have enough to put me over the top. But I won this time, though. But only because my opponent was having even worse rolls than I was, which was quite remarkable because I was not rolling well at all for much of the game. This will probably get dusty again. I'm at the middling levels at Yucata, and it takes me about a year or so to level up nowadays. Let's see what a contributor brought out of the dust. Morton K, username Tigrello, brought a bunch of games out of the dust last month, but let's take a look at 2 particularly interesting ones. First up is Reef Encounter by Richard Breeze, one of the few non-key games by the celebrated designer. Reef Encounter, published in 2004, is a colorful but heavy area control hand management tile-laying game. Morton last played it 1 year, 4 months, and 19 days ago, and currently rates it a 7 out of 10. He writes, "When I first tried this 6 or 7 years ago, against 3 friends, I didn't like it at all. Geek buddies love it, so I was convinced to give it another try 2 years ago, and this time I liked it much better, even though it was only at 2. But back on the shelf, it didn't get pulled out again till now. Actually, it's still standing in the dust because I played it online against a couple of GCL mates. Playing something as interactive as this online across different time zones really doesn't get the best out of the game, so I'm not sure I'd want to play it that way again, but I'd love to play it face-to-face soon." Morton also brought Virgin Queen, a GMT game designed by Ed Beach from 2012, out of the dust. Virgin Queen is one of the top-ranked war games on BGG. Morton last played it 1 year, 2 months, and 1 day ago, and currently rates it a 8 out of 10. He writes, "And now for the big one. I was ill last time my group played Virgin Queen, so it's lasted longer than I wanted since my last play. Also, we had played Here I Stand in the meantime, so I haven't been out of action entirely. This was a particularly great 5-player game with lots of warring, and not that much negotiating, as it sometimes is. All 5 players were close at the end, and 4 of them were within millimeters of a victory at one stage of the 6 turns we played. Thanks for the contributions, Morton. The next time I play Reef Encounter, it will be an Out of the Dust play. I recall it being a very good game, but quite intricate. It's one of those games I'm going to have to completely refamiliarize myself with the rules before playing again." Reaction segment time. On the reaction segment this week, I'd like to address the reports of theft at Essen. If you haven't heard about this, there were multiple booths hit over the convention weekend by an apparently organized group of thieves. According to reports, one member of the group would approach the target and ask a booth worker to check on something that they would have to leave the booth for, or look in an enclosed area for. Another member of the group would then tie up any other booth workers with questions, leaving another member of the group the opportunity to grab the unsecured cash box and scurry away. Thousands of euros were stolen this way, from multiple booths. In one of those robbery attempts, a group of convention-goers picked up on what was going on and forcibly detained one of the members of the group after their partner ran off with the cash box. That's cool. Good for those guys on being vigilant and catching one of the suspects. There are thefts like this at other conventions, but not at the scale of the Essen ones, which happen in greater numbers and cost the booths a lot more money. Reading the reports of the thefts on BGG, this may be largely due to the fact that Essen is a cash-centered convention. This makes me wonder if the thieves are board gamers, or if they're non-gamers who have done their homework and recognize a plum opportunity when they see it. That's pure speculation, but it would be nice if the perpetrators weren't board gamers, because it's been my experience that board gamers are generally honest people. At one of Omaha's local conventions, there's a day set aside for a board game swap meet. All of us who participate set up tables displaying our wares and post signs displaying our phone numbers so interested buyers or traders can text us if they want something. And then we go play games clear across the convention hall or in another room entirely, leaving the games completely unprotected. Is this a recipe for disaster? Well, so far, after years of this practice, there have been exactly 0 instances of theft. And then there was the last time I went to Gen Con. I had a bag full of hobby games I just purchased from their booth that I stupidly left somewhere. I retraced my steps to the best of my ability, couldn't find the bag, and left a description of it at Lost and Found. 20 minutes later, I get a call from Lost and Found saying my bag had been dropped off there with all the games present and accounted for. There are exceptions to these good experiences, of course, but the positive experiences do seem to be far more typical of board game conventions than any negative ones. So what's the solution to the Essen problem? Vigilance is a good start, and let's applaud those guys again who had the courage to step up and act when they witness something going amiss. Some have suggested that booths start anchoring their cash boxes to their tables, but I like the common sense solution of the BGG editors best. For goodness sakes, it's 2018! Let's enable Wi-Fi at the Essen Convention Center and let vendors take credit card payments. Patrons won't have to carry around so much cash themselves, and vendors will have far less tempting targets as a result. It's crazy to think that this is the case, that the world's largest board game convention doesn't have Wi-Fi. But there you go. Sounds like an easy and obvious step in the right direction to me. On the What I've Been Playing segment this week, I'd like to tell you about a game recently fulfilled from Kickstarter called The Estates. This is a game designed by Klaus Zock, who has quite a few games to his credit, most of them obscure, and his previously most well-known one appearing to be Chicken Cha-Cha-Cha. The Estates is a re-implementation of his earlier design, New Habit, which I'd never heard of before, but apparently was a hard-to-find grail game for enough people to fund this Kickstarter re-implementation. The Estates was not on my radar at all, and indeed was something I vaguely recall passing over during the campaign because I saw it was a city-building game, which is not a theme that excites me. But my friend Peter was a backer, and when he wanted to try it out after getting his pledge, I obligingly helped. I've been appreciating auction games more and more recently, so I was mildly curious about The Estates. So I went into the game with no expectations, really, and honestly only mild interest. But you know what? This game blew me away. Here's how it works. Players bid on blocks numbered 1 to 6 in 6 various colors, and erect the ones they win as floors in growing skyscrapers. The first time a block of a new color is auctioned off, the stock for that color is included in the auction, and the winner gains control of that color for the rest of the game. When a block of a different color is placed on top of another one, the owner of the building changes to the owner of the new block's color. Since blocks of descending value can only be placed on top of each other, eventually a building gets as high as it can go. But numbered roof tiles can also be auctioned off to cap off buildings at any time, securing ownership for the color on top. The buildings are erected in one of 3 rows. When 2 of the 3 rows are filled up with completed buildings, the game ends and the buildings in those rows score positive points equal to the sum of their floor blocks and roof tiles. But the unfinished row of buildings score negative points equal to the sum of the floor blocks and roof tiles. The tension is speculating not just in what a player hopes will become a profitable color, but also purposefully changing ownership of buildings to what a player hopes will become a positive scoring building, or purposefully sabotaging a building to an opposing color that a player hopes will become a negative scoring building is intense and wonderful. The fact that these auctions also become a press your luck mechanic on when to auction off roof tiles and which buildings to cap them with when is icing on the cake. But just to make matters even more tension-filled and intense is the shrinking economy of the game. You see, players start off with a certain amount of money, and this becomes a fixed economy for the game. The only way players will ever get more money is by auctioning off an item on their turn that someone else wins, for which the player gets paid instead of a game bank. But at the beginning of their turn, a player can also stash away $1 to add to their score at the end of the game, money that is removed from the shrinking economy entirely. This is a brilliant mechanic, and I was quite taken with it. You wouldn't think $1 here or there would matter much, but by the last round, each one still remaining became magnified in importance. We only played a 1-round game, but in a long game, players would reset the next round's economy based on how much they stashed away and ended up with, which would add yet another layer to the consequences of the important decisions being constantly made. I don't know if I have the heart for that much tension, and the 1-round game felt really good, but I suspect I'll be able to give the long game a try before too much longer. In the meantime, my initial assessment of the estates is resoundingly positive. I'm super impressed with this tight design. It goes on my wish list, and I would be quite satisfied if my BGG Secret Santa wound up tracking down a copy for me. Obscure Bryce Game segment time. This week I'm going to tell you about a game called Tahuantinsuyu, a game published in 2004 by Hangman Games and designed by Alan Ernstein. Hangman Games is a now defunct publisher, but were noteworthy for publishing most of their games in the same type of pizza box and literally just pasting a different cover on the box for each different title. All their games, besides Tahuantinsuyu, have become quite obscure in the 10 years since they ceased operations. Alan was the driving force behind the company, but he has gone on to publish games for a few other publishers since then, mainly Z-Man. His most owned game is Inca Empire from Z-Man, which is a re-implementation of Tahuantinsuyu, with the chief distinguishing feature appearing to be the use of wooden roads to create routes on the board instead of Tahuantinsuyu's crayons. Inca Empire is only slightly less obscure than Tahuantinsuyu, but it was Tahuantinsuyu's use of the crayon route drawing mechanism that put it on my radar. Several years ago, when I was first getting into the Crayon Rails series, which is one of my favorite series of games ever, I was curious if any other games used a route drawing mechanism. A search of the mechanic on the BGG yielded just a few other titles, one of which was Tahuantinsuyu, so it went on my wish list as a curiosity. It's not a widely owned game, but it wasn't difficult to get it to match up with my offerings when it showed up unexpectedly in a math trade once. I don't think anybody else was competing for it. And then it languished on my unplayed shelf for years. I've been targeting my unplayed shelf with a concerted effort these last few years and have decreased it from about 150 games at its peak to under 25 now. And Tahuantinsuyu was one of these last 25 and one of the few truly obscure games left on the shelf, which made it a prime candidate finally for my recurring obscure Bryce Game of the Month demo at Spielbound, Omaha's Board Game Cafe. I had a full complement of 4 players for the game, and it went over really well. Here's how it works. The game follows a scripted path through 4 ages of the Inca Empire, equaling 7 rounds. Each round progresses through a series of 4 phases, which are listed in various orders and various quantities in any particular round. An income phase begins each round and gives players more manpower to work with. The innovative Sun phase allows players to play powerful event cards between 2 players